understand ancient Greek medicine, we need to first understand the basics of the ancient Greek time period. This time period can be divided into two main parts, the pre-Hippocratic and the post-Hippocratic. The pre-Hippocratic time period is before Hippocrates' contributions in the 5th and 4th century BC. As the name insinuates, the post-Hippocratic time period is after the contributions to medicine made by Hippocrates. During the pre-Hippocratic time period, Greeks were still turning to their gods for everything. They believed that the answers to their questions only laid with the gods. It was strongly believed that at the time, gods were the only source of help for them. At this time, physicians existed to simply pray on behalf of the sick. There were no available treatments they could perform, so people would pray to the gods for a speedy recovery and hope for the best. The post-Hippocratic time period was the start of a new era for Greek medicine. By this time, people had more experiences with illnesses and started to develop a better understanding of their body. Instead of simply relying on the gods, they were able to make their own remedies. To make it easy for you to understand the ancient Greek beliefs about the body, we can divide them into spiritual and empiricist beliefs. The spiritual beliefs come from the pre-Hippocratic time period, whilst the empiricists come from the post-Hippocratic time period. In the early stages of Greek medicine, it was believed that illness was a divine punishment and that healing was a gift from the gods. However, later on as they progressed, they made attempts to identify a scientific cause for illnesses, rather than rely on spiritual beliefs. Ancient Greek medicine was not based off of knowledge gained through experiences. It was a collection of methods and beliefs used to help diagnose illnesses. Thales, a Greek philosopher, started the theory that all physical matter is composed of the four elements: fire, air, water, and earth. These elements were associated with biological states such as hot, cold, wet, and dry, respectively. The Greeks believed that an imbalance of these elements could cause a sickness. In the later stages of Greek medicine, they turned to believing logic and scientific experiments over myths. Hippocrates was able to analyze the human body in order to build upon Thales' theory. Hippocrates believed that each body had four humors: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. An imbalance of heat, wetness, dryness, and cold would cause an imbalance in the four humors. During the earlier parts of the post-Hippocratic time period, dissections and surgeries were still considered inauspicious. Physicians were able to commonly see open wounds on gladiators as a result of their fighting. Later on, philosophers decided that the human body was not needed in the afterlife, and so the Greeks were able to perform dissections and surgeries. Through these dissections and surgeries, they learned that the brain controls the movements of the limbs, not the heart. They learned that blood moves through the veins, prayers are useless against illnesses such as the plague, and epilepsy is not caused by gods, and finally, disease can be caused by the environment.
The most common diseases in ancient Greece had much to do with the lack of sanitary, healthcare, and wellness. In an ancient and urban society with no supplies of running water and sewage systems, the average life expectancy in ancient Greece was low. People were living in close and unsanitary communities, a perfect medium for communicable diseases and bacteria to spread. The Greeks in the ancient times did have some knowledge of frequently occurring diseases, thanks to the father of medicine, Hippocrates. The bubonic plague, otherwise known as the Black Plague or the Black Death, is a deadly bacterial infection caused by a bacteria called Yersinia pestis, carried by infected rodents or fleas. This plague has claimed the lives of a significant amount of the population in ancient Greece. In the Plague of Athens, which was a breakout that spread with the accompany of a civil war against Sparta and Athens in 431 to 404 BC, around 75,000 to 100,000 people were killed, making a staggering 25% of the population affected by the plague. The bubonic plague affects your lymphatic system, causing inflammation in your lymph nodes. Untreated, it can move into the blood or to the lungs. Symptoms of this disease include fever and chills, headaches, muscle pain, and painful swollen lymph glands called buboes. The Greeks at this time were unable to discover a cure for this disease. Another cause of deaths in ancient Greece were diseases and infections infected by infants at an early age. A staggering 52% of children in ancient Greece would not survive until the age of 10 years old. Common diseases and infections which the infants were prone to were diarrhea and infections and diseases spread by waterborne bacteria and lack of sanitation and hygiene. Hippocrates was the first physician to identify the relationship between the environment and the respiratory system. He was the first to use the term asthma, Greek for wind or blow, for panting and respiratory diseases and distress. All severe symptoms portrayed as if the individual was being strangled and was desperate for air. The symptoms included ruddy cheeks, protruding eyes, cough incessant and laborious, and being thin and cold. Diarrhea was another common infection which is still common in modern days. The most common causes for diarrhea were spoiled food, bacterial infection, and contaminated water. The word cancer is another invention of Hippocrates, which adds to his reputation of being the father of medicine. Cancer, especially breast cancer for women, was diagnosed and described in ancient times, but it never occurred with the frequency it does in modern times, perhaps an indication that many cancers result from toxic carcinogens that are products from the industrial age. It caused swelling, acute pain, and bleeding. Leprosy was another disease that occurred frequently in ancient Greece. The disease is caused by slow-growing bacteria called Mycobacterium leprae. Leprosy mostly affects the skin and nerves outside the brain and spinal cord, also known as peripheral nerves. It usually took 3 to 5 years for the symptoms of this disease to take place. In the pre-Hippocratic time, people thought that this disease was a curse or punishment from the gods. Cholera is an infection in the intestines, caused by the consumption of water or food which has been contaminated with a bacteria called Vibrio cholerae. The symptoms of this disease include watery diarrhea, vomiting, and severe dehydration, which could cause serious health issues such as seizures and kidney failure. This disease could kill if not treated properly. The ancient Greeks could not find a cure, but they created the miasmatic theory of disease, and they found out that the cause of the disease was air pollution and prevented further contamination by using good hygiene habits. In the present day, we now have therapy to prevent dehydration and also oral rehydration, while antibiotics are prescribed to shorten the course of this disease. As the Greek cities and towns were urban societies with no sewage systems and supplies of running water, the citizens were prone to diseases and infectious bacteria. Although the ordinary individuals in ancient Greece could not afford and have access to health care, the rich families did. The families who could afford to follow the program of health were to follow a guideline to stay healthy. They had to keep themselves in the right temperature, eat healthy, clean, and enough food, wash themselves in the public baths, clean their teeth, and go for walks to keep fit. In addition, Pythagoras' theory of the balance of opposites led to Greek doctors recommending a moderation in all things. Hippocrates and other leaders high in power accepted that ordinary citizens would be too busy or poor to follow such a regime. Therefore, they would be less healthy than the rest. In texts that Hippocrates had written, it states that the guidelines to be healthy in regimen and a program for health.
At the time, ancient Greece was rapidly advancing in respect to their progress in the medical field. With their extensive focus on the medical industry, Greek doctors made a vast amount of scientific discoveries. This focused on predominantly the biological functions of the human body, as well as the disclosure of the medicinal properties of over 600 different herbs. For instance, Greek doctors occasionally performed surgeries, in the form of dissections, on both animals and humans to further understand their internal bodily functions. This led to the discovery of the fact that arteries carry blood rather than air. Dioscorides, a Greek physician, primarily conducted studies on herbal medicine and formed the primary foundation of herbal medicine practiced until the year 1500. Based on their properties, plants were utilized for certain disorders, with the use of others to contain the spread of pathogens through specialized treatments. Such treatments were often in the form of healing draughts, a combination of multiple herbs to produce a medicinal beverage. However, with the outbreak of the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Plague, wiped out a staggering value of 1/3 of the current Greek population present in Athens. As a result of such a rapidly evolving epidemic, there was no cure at the time, hence having no option but to rely on prayer or pilgrimage. As the Greeks had no anesthetics, and only having the use of a mix of herbal antiseptic mixes, they were not able to perform deep operations on patients and could only work near the surface. In the diagnosis of patients, doctors would perform a thorough physical examination of patients, in which they scanned for symptoms of a suspected disease. Such a practice was later supported by further examination of a patient's body or corpses. As a result of such conducted studies, Greek doctors were able to identify various diseases and illnesses, including chest-related diseases, pneumonia, and basic fevers and colds. According to Medical News Today, cures for common chest diseases included a culmination of barley soup with the addition of vinegar and honey to bring up the phlegm and cough it out. Moreover, pneumonia was treated by giving the patient a bath while standing completely still. When attempting to restore the normal temperature of a patient, doctors would maintain patients warm when having a cold, while as well as keeping feverish patients dry and cool. Hippocrates, a Greek physician, was often regarded as the father of medicine, due to his vast amount of studies and texts on the basis of medicine. During the period of ancient Greece, Greek doctors were required to take the Hippocratic Oath, regarding a pledge on the balance of ethical standards. The Hippocratic texts argued different points of view, respective to a variety of different matters. Such matters discussed the diagnosing and treating of different diseases, coping with broken or dislocated joints, epidemics, appropriate diets, and environmental aspects associated with health risks. The above-mentioned texts were often utilized by doctors when treating or diagnosing patients as a guideline for appropriate procedures.
One of the most famous Greek doctors is Hippocrates. He quoted, "Sickness is not taken by the gods or sent by them. It is a natural basis, and if we can find the cause, we can find the cure." Greek doctors were very quickly to become extremely skilled and very professional. All doctors had to take the Hippocrates Oath, which bound them to keep people's private and personal secrets, and never to give poison to any of their patients. Greek doctors were trained well from a child. You had to have good bedside manners and were also careful with communication and contact with their patients. Cures that Greek doctors used were very similar to what anyone would try to cure a cold or fever by themselves. Blocking bleeds and having a cold and a fever were all common sicknesses that Greek doctors knew how to cure. As medicine, they would use nature. An example of this would be keeping their patients dry and cool. Greek doctors believed that most illnesses were related to religion. They saw gods as important to health and temples of God as healing. They believed if you slept in a temple at night, Asclepius, a Greek demigod, and her daughters would come to heal you. Doctors got a basic understanding of illnesses and started to understand the basic knowledge. They understood that when people would get sick, their body fluids would decrease. They thought that you would get sick from an imbalance of the four humors, later linked to the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Also the four seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and winter.